Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Senator Debates. I'm Sophia Francis, serving as both the Elections Chair and the Chief Justice of the Judicial Review Board. These debates are an opportunity where our student population can truly be informed on those they are electing, and for candidates to expand on their aims, visions, or objectives for their term of office. Senators advocate and represent the interest of the student body at large in Senate meetings, training, action and event planning, as well as impacting the proposal of the student fee allocation through oversight over the final proposals. The Senate represents the members devoted to creating a strong, effective, and efficient student government and is an essential asset to ASPSU. Today we have Cam Rodriguez moderating our debate. Following the debates, we'll open the floor for audience questions. You can either ask your questions directly in this mic, which will be over there, or jot them down on the materials available at the check-in table. Each candidate is given 2 minutes to answer each question, and candidates have 1 minute to rebuttal. If you would like to rebuttal, please use the buzzers provided and wait for your fellow candidate to finish answering their question. I will raise this green card, signaling that I've heard that you will be able to rebuttal. So I'll now hand the floor off to you guys, and Nehemiah, if you'd like to introduce yourself, your slate, and why you're running.
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Nehemiah Wilson. I also go by Nemo. I'm running with PSU for You. So I say that again?
Could you also introduce the pronouns?
Oh, yes, please. Absolutely. Sorry. I use he, him pronouns. And as for why I'm running for Senate is because I really want to see more engagement here on campus. I'm really, passionate about making sure that community grows here. I've already been working within the Student Life Committee currently within this past year and putting a lot of efforts to make sure that something is, efforts are being pushed. Really trying to make, kind of push the community and their events. So honestly, I just want to do more work in that regard.
That's amazing. I'm Will Scholes. I'm also on the PSU for You slate. My pronouns are he, him. And I'm running because I'd love to see a more sustainable campus where students can get involved in the issues that they care about.
Okay, so my name is Eduardo Alexis Diaz, Addy. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm part of the Voices for Action slate, and I'm running for senator. One of the reasons why I wanted to run for senator, as I did last year, is that I want to see the more community engagement, as well as with the the amount with the engagement between both in the student body and as well as with the resources that we have in regards to it.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Love it. Our first question will be a one for all of you to answer. So it won't be a question and rebuttal. It'll be kind of the same thing. What are the 3 most pressing issues facing PSU students currently?
I think I don't mind answering this first. Okay. So I'd say 3 of the most pressing issues currently is, especially right now, it's the sense of community and coming together. I think there's a large sense that things are divided, which I don't think things have to be that way. I feel that, while tensions are currently very high with many things, that doesn't mean that community has to be disregarded. And we can come together and fight issues together regarding these issues. So I'd say that's one big issue. I think housing poses a very major stress on students currently. I think a lot of students, either they're concerned about the conditions of their housing or finding housing that's affordable to them. And I know another issue, especially with the international students, is that of health insurance. I know that health insurance is a very big issue that they have to run through. So if we can do whatever we can to address that, I think that'd be super important.
Yeah, I'll follow that up by saying I totally agree with everything Nemo was saying. I think also something that students have really shown that they care about is Nemo had mentioned the community on campus. I think students want to be involved in what's happening on campus, and students want to be in the know. There's been some clear sort of transparency issues with administration, with how things are being run. The budget is being cut, enrollment is dropping. What can we do, right? Students want to get involved. People care about their school and they want to be able to help. And that's something that I've seen a lot of students try and get involved with, and they just don't know how. Another big issue I see is people are this is a commuter school, so people are coming to school, and it's expensive to take either transit or driving a car here. Parking is hard to get on campus, and transit, even though we offer passes, it's still often inaccessible to lower-income students. And then a third thing that I think is really important is the way that we're building spaces on on campus rather. There's lots of places where students are able to go, there are resource centers, but a lot of these areas have been sort of neglected in the past couple of years, especially since COVID, since more classes have moved online. People aren't able to get the resources that they need.
I have no comment. Yeah. I hate to admit this, I'm done.
Okay. With the debate?
No, with the debate, with the question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. What motivated you to choose the slate that you are in?
I guess I don't mind answering first. One of the things that motivated me to join PSU for You is that a lot of the members are members who have been working currently within student government. There's a lot of push to make things happen. And I'm recognizing that momentum, that ideas that are pushing forward these big plans, these things that are getting started right now or have been in the works for a while since this academic year. And I just want to see those get continued into the next year. So I feel that PSU for You, they have a lot of the expertise to make sure that this gets done. And so to me, I feel it's important to work within this slate and honestly just do more work for students. I want to make sure that more resources come to students through our team.
Yeah, I'll follow that up by saying I'm in the PSU for You slate because I've seen the incredible cooperation that has gone down in both the current PSU, the ASPSU administration, and also just in the few new members that are joining PSU for You. We've just been able to really create a sense of our own community, and we've been able to work together and cooperate. Even if we have different interests and different abilities, we're really able to use our skills in successful ways together.
Do you mind repeat the question?
Of course. What motivated you to choose the slate that you were in?
Well, oh boy. Well, yeah, I was torn between both, but then I wanted to go more for voices of action because honestly, I'm more of a person who wants just to see actual change to happen and all that. Even though most of my competitors, the work that you've put in for ever since I was gone, you guys have been doing such a great job. But actually, even though as much as I wanted to support, but actually I just kind of feel like there has to be more change because for us, that ever since even though I'm not bringing bring change for the students. I mean, sorry. Honestly, the amount of work as well as the amount of direction that's been pushed in, it's somehow and kind of honestly, it's kind of felt like it's not enough and all that because a lot of students who are with first generation who are also from many other of the diversities and all that who wouldn't they want to see cambios, they want to see the real changes going on. It's we can't just expect the same here's a solution. This is what we're going to do based on what we have to do, but how will it guarantee for students if it's going to carry forward? For us, for Voices for Action, we're trying to make affirmative action in regards to the issues that are still underlying.
Awesome. Okay, so the next questions will be whoever buzzes in first can answer it. Since one slate that was supposed to be here isn't here, it's going to be a little bit more vague, and instead of asking slates specifically. I will talk about previous incumbents, but anybody can answer. So previous incumbents used the excuse of getting to know their role as a response for inaction. What current changes and actual plans do you have to understanding the role quickly and effectively enacting change?
So one of the main things that we're doing right now, at least, is making sure that the training documents are available, and also it'll be very effective if we can have early start with the teams, because I know that there was a sense that, like, for example, when I joined, it was a little bit late. I joined about maybe halfway into the fall term, and so there was, very much the sense of like rapidly having to learn my position. And so the hope would be that as we build our team now, we can effectively train each other during the summer, so then come fall term, immediately taking action. It's no longer this like sense of like having to learn our roles. It's we're already taking over. I think, and a lot of it, at least for this year, there was a lot of members, at least within Senate and such, that were fairly new to the role, at least here on PSU campus. And so I think that was one of the major issues. But now we've had a lot more time. We've kind of been able to, develop in our abilities within our teams. And then also now we're making sure that we have documents and things that can get passed on to the next team. So it's no longer this sense like they're starting with like, oh, what am I supposed to do? It's like, hey, here's plans. Like, we've already developed these solid ideas we want to see happen to the next year. Whether or not, we get to continue our work within student government, these are now able to be passed on to the next team. So there's guaranteed to be some kind of action starting into the next year.
I would like to add to that by just saying that as a person who has not been a senator before, I have been going to every, or at least lots of publicly available meetings. I've been meeting with my slate, learning about my role, what I'll be doing, all of the committees. I'm hoping to be on the Student Advisory Committee next year. I am basically just trying to get as involved as I can right now before I'm a senator so that I know exactly what I need to do once I'm a senator.
Yes.
Can you repeat the question?
You want me to repeat the question? Okay. So this is question 3. Previous incumbents use the excuse of getting to know their role as a response for inaction. As a new member, how do you plan on on understanding their role quickly and effectively in order to enact change?
From what I can recall from both Kara and Dom, which awesome ladies, which I know them personally, basically what during my time from last year that kind of been like is more like, even though in regards to how there wasn't enough time like for training and all that, but from what I can recall, when I, became part of a senator, there was somewhat of a training at the time. Like, it was between 1 or 2 days, actually. But what I'm hoping to bring for the slate, in case of, come summer, or, in case when, a student potentially wanted to join for, ASPSU, decides we would have to, show them the ropes and all that, because even if we would just dump them with, oh, yeah, here's your role, what you have to do. Sometimes you just have to, how about... I'll give you an example. How about when if you're seeing someone do their duties, why not have them do a little bit of a practice and all that, what the person will have to do, because if we just instantly just put them on their respective role, they wouldn't have any idea how to do it. But as long as we give them the ropes, let's say, okay, here's the plan. Here's the duties, and I will show you how to do a report. How you can follow up with from the committee reports, as well as keeping on time with the with what we have to plan for the upcoming events, the upcoming Senate meetings, and as well as the upcoming future opportunities that will have to be in the future. Mm-hmm. That's why we what I'm hoping with our say, we're trying to create a little bridge for training and all that, so that when they're in that specific role, they will learn by the ropes and adapt quickly to it.
Perfect. One established, the one slate does it, and if the other one rebuttals, then the other one can respond, but not both of them. Okay, so going forward, only one slate can answer the question. Only one member of the slate can answer the question, unless there's a rebuttal in which you can respond to the rebuttal, but not responding to each other. The fourth question, PSU prides itself as a commuter school that serves unconventional students, which means those students might not necessarily be on campus at times of events. What do you plan on doing to increase participation of these students? And it's by buzzer. So.
Yeah, I'd say that having events that are accessible for students online is something that could be pretty easily done. I mean, Zoom has existed since COVID has existed, and before COVID has existed. And even during sort of school hours where lots of people commute to school and then they they are on campus just for the times that they are studying. If you have events specifically for times that are after classes, so after the 4 o'clock window when lots of classes end, when right before lots of classes start, you can schedule your events so that it's more accessible for students, and you can also make it more accessible for students to get to campus in the first place by incentivizing people to use transit through several different means.
I mean, honestly, I agree with you, but how will it, even though it will incentivize, but how would you incentivize, with the people having to go, to do these events? I mean, if we're talking about Zoom, I'd say, if there's let's say an online event, we could probably do, let's say, a virtual game night, let's say, because all of us, from what I remember from when I was, part of the Senate and all that, part of when the committee and all that, I, sent out a link to just, it's kind of more like a what was the word? Stress relief. Because a lot of people who are, not even on campus, they can't be in person because of, other time commitments, traffic, and as well as, I mean, how, even though, as much as I love your idea, I mean, how will it, incentivize? Even though if we have these online events for free.
So in the sense of having online free events, of course, that would require some work to make it more engaging for the audiences. But I think in order to incentivize students who are commuters when coming to campus, it's just making sure that we can lower as many barriers for them. In the sense that, we need to make sure that when they come to campus, like was mentioned, is that they have, events that are happening within their time frame. Or, for example, if we could understand when the peak hours are, which I believe is mostly between 8 a.m. until maybe about 5 p.m., that's when most things are happening with at least students commuting to campus, and then maybe by the time they're leaving campus. So if we could have events or something in between that time, things that don't require a lot of time commitment, something that they can just walk in, quickly grab something, engage with fellow students, and then leave. And so I think that would be one way to kind of really capture these audiences that, may feel that they're missing out.
Awesome. What will your plan be with ongoing protests? Will you support demonstrations, and to what limits?
So when it comes to, students' right to voice their, how they feel, that's very important to encourage and to make sure that they are, have that ability, because voice is the only thing we have as students. That is how we get what we want to happen. It's how we organize and make sure that we as students are being heard. And of course it's important to make sure that we're, giving our protests in ways that are, either, peaceful, or making sure that they are, in line with different policies to an extent. But sometimes, civil disobedience is required. And it's important, though, to make sure that those who are voicing it are, actually being heard. And there are some times, for example, in the most recent event, where a lot of peaceful protests were happening the entire week. And then, of course, things escalated, and that's all that people could talk about. They were no longer talking about the many students who were pushing for a need, something that they wanted to happen. Now everyone's just focused on this one aspect, and I think that's unfair. I think it's important, if students are speaking out and they're saying their opinion and they want to be heard and they're assembling peacefully and they're demonstrating in a way that is peaceful, that's very important. And so I feel that it's very, very much so important to uplift student voices, but of course to make sure and encourage that they assemble peacefully. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I had a rebuttal. Honestly,
Yes.
I agree, because we as students, we actually, have a voice so that we could, I agree what you said, but actually in regards to how it escalated and all that, I mean, honestly, we would have to ensure that it had to be a peaceful protest, because what happened last week, a lot of people brought a lot of anxiety, worry, and I was kind of one of those students that kind of mentally stressed out and on the verge of on the verge, because I've kind of experienced it firsthand. I mean, I was supportive of them, but then by the time passed, unfortunately it wasn't it wasn't as peaceful as I would have thought of be. So I mean, I would have advocate for them to like to protest, peacefully, and as well as just let their voices and their actions just try to make a change, but in a way that like it's safe for everyone.
If I may rebuttal to that. While I do think it's important, I understand, like, if things get high in tension, it can feel unsafe. However, that was escalated by the presence of the police on campus. That was not because of the fact that students were being violent. It was because police escalated the scene. And it's important to, allow, students need to have their voice heard. And when it's not heard, when there's no action happening, that's when, you have these moments where people are upset and they're yelling and they're screaming. And sometimes yelling and screaming, it can feel like it is, I guess, aggressive. But I can, definitely attest, because I was at some of these, these rallies, for example, the recent rally that was in front of the KMC building, and that was a very peaceful assembly. And it was very loud, and it was aggressive, but they were passionate, and that's what I was seeing from students is passion. And so that's why it's important to uplift the voices of students. And yes, sometimes things can get heated and feel unsafe, but it's important to make sure student voice is being heard, regardless.
Well,
Go
just
ahead.
final comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I agree with you, but
Final comment.
But the same thing is, I will, given that how like currently with the library being closed down, I mean, even as much as we want to give out like a positive like impact on our voice, I mean, we have to think about the negatives though. I mean, honestly, with how it escalated, I mean, yes, I do believe the police did escalate the conflict, even with the president, offering with a amnesty solution, but it didn't it didn't work out, in which things escalated.
Mm-hmm.
Next question.
Yes, go ahead.
Do you feel or have any resolution for students who might disagree with faculty when we are all getting messages through the PSU Commerce email? Do you suggest any alternatives to allow a freer and more transparent address of information to students?
And I mean, you guys have been more involved than I was. Go ahead.
Would you mind restating the question?
Yeah.
1 second.
Yeah.
Do you feel that the school gives students enough transparency as far as events go, including other students?
Gotcha. Thank you.
Well, in regards with the the transparency given but from the school and to the students, unfortunately, well, even with the enough clarification that there is, I don't. Unfortunately, it's not enough at this point, because even with the lack of direction between both the faculty and the students that are currently in, in lights with the recent events, and as well as with the for clarifications when people come in, as well as from their first year, there isn't that transparency. What we want to see is just is this really gonna sorry will this really be effective? Because as much as we want to keep believing on that, what we want to see is to see our our sons, our hijos, our hijas, our daughters to succeed in in this university. Because at the same time, I'll give this as an example. Remember, say, for a special needs student, how much of the services that you will provide, it'll really help them to to thrive, to actually grow successful. When even though there are resources given to them, it's how with our for example the DRC, even though they will set it up and all that, but with the but with how it is structured, and as well as with how difficult the process is, it it wouldn't disorient the student to let's say, as much as I want to just do this with the service, I just feel like I just have to do this on my own. There's this lack, that barrier.
I mean, I certainly agree with a lot of what you're saying about how there should be a more streamlined process for students to be able to get in touch with the resources they need. I think as it stands with transparency from administration, what I have seen is that there have been attempts to effectively reduce transparency by administration. A perfect example is the closure of the campus in the past couple of days. Last week, there were entirely peaceful protests happening in the library up until Thursday, when the police force arrived, and campus was entirely shut down during that time, with the intention that students wouldn't be able to see what was happening on campus. And students have a right to know what's happening on campus and in their community, and they have a right to get involved with protest if they want to. And there needs to be a more... Cool.
Next question.
All good.
One of the criticisms directed at the current administration was a lack of regular events. How do you, going forward, plan on maintaining a cycle of regular events for the future?
Yeah, which honestly, I mean, I'm gonna have to rip this out the Band-Aid. From what I saw when I was out, there's like that little engagement. But one of the reasons why, sorry, can you repeat that? What I wanted to see, current, there was that lack of current events. Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, given how it was last year, I want to create an environment where with students as well as with faculty have get to build relationships, get to know each other, having that link between with the students from different backgrounds, and as well as with understand their how or who they are and all that. Because from a notable event, I'm going to bring this up, was the winter formal and the prom from the previous administration, which though it took a lot of meticulous planning, which I wanted to see. I wanted to to see with people having to engage with having to make up with the opportunities that they never would have experienced, for example with the 2020 students not be able to complete their their prom, their their dances and all that. But in addition, with how Party at the Park, and as well as with the with the current events that are currently is, I wish I want to see that much more more change, because I just wanted as an average student, they want to get involved in the student community, and they want to be part of the get to know with the new people and make new connections.
So I just want to mention in regards to the idea that events were happening this year, and I can understand within the fall, and especially but we did have an event at the end of fall term, which was the Friendsgiving event that did happen. In winter term, though, there was a transition of positions within student government. And since then, though, there's been a lot of involvement within the community. And so we've been very involved, for example, with international students, the Organization of International Students. We're helping them and co-sponsoring to make sure that they have access to their event and making sure it's bigger and better. We've been working with students here on campus to make sure we have the Save the Food Carts event, which will be happening this term. And we've also been doing a lot of work with student groups here on campus, because we've realized that, for example, a bit of disclosure within student government with, for example, Student Life Committee, is we have $1,500 per term to do events and such. We have found that it's been more effective, at least, to support other students' events rather than our own, so that we can promote more community-driven events, rather than, student government has ideas, but it's important to promote students.
Thank you. This is actually for PSU for you.
Yes.
Members of your slate have stated that since CPSO can choose whether or not to be armed, nothing more needs to be done in regards to the demand made by Disarm PSU movement. Can you explain the reasoning behind this choice or this statement?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Disarm PSU has done a fantastic job, and they're an excellent organization and committee. The problem that we're seeing is that the CPSO has not listened. It was voted for them to have their weapons removed or their firearms removed in the wake of the Jason Washington murder, and since then they have given themselves back the right to have arms, and they are a functioning separate police force. They're not controlled by students as much as we would want them to be, right? We want them to be a force that is here to protect us and to serve us. And that's sadly not what we see happening. And realistically, it's going to take a considerable effort with probably lots of different groups on campus, as well as administrative efforts to really disarm PSU.
Go ahead.
Well, I do agree with you, to having to disarm, and I won't, pass with, how the, the incident that, that unfortunately covered our school, but even with, with the disarmament of, with the PSU campus and all that, even though as much as we don't have much control with the security, I mean, as much as, I don't want to touch too much of it, but all I'm going to say is that, even if we do, at a somewhat disarm completely, PSU, I mean, what would happen in case of let's say police activity and all that, something suspicious activity would happen? How would be like a safe, safety? How will it have a safe campus?
Yeah, I'll answer that. So I can just lead us right back to last week. We had lots of peaceful protests going on. There were several violent outbursts within the peaceful protests that were immediately handled by on-the-scene de-escalators without weapons. And the moment that an armed police force showed up, it became significantly more violent and dangerous for students. So I would argue that the students can honestly take care of themselves in a safe manner without police arms on campus, and that really the presence of police, especially armed police, can be just as threatening and unsafe as any other armed person. That's
Awesome. PSU administration currently has no plans in place for a mass casualty event, such as a mass shooting or the recent bomb threats. How has your slate addressed this in the past, and how do you plan to address it going forward?
That's a very difficult question to answer. And so I think in regards to this, there needs to be, I know we have, for example, here on campus, a lot of security measures in place in regards to having access to buildings, and that's been, I think has helped make people feel more comfortable. However, when it comes to those things, I think there just needs to be better transparency in the communication regarding these things, where, for example, I know that when the bomb threat happened, it was very much so just clear the area. No information given, no sense of what actions to take. They didn't say, stay indoors, stay safe. It just said clear the area, don't go nearby. And that's that lack of information, I think honestly made people more curious to go check it out. If they were given more information regarding what's happening, here is what's going on, and then given an active procedure of here's what you should do in this event of something going on. I think also in regards, maybe there could be a sense of a training in regards, much in the same way as there are drills in how
lockdown,
Yeah, but let them.
and so for example, there's always the fire drills that happen here on campus regarding the dorms. So maybe not necessarily that to that extreme, but definitely having something in place that students know this is a location I can go to in the event of something that happens.
Would you like to rebuttal at all?
No, just an added comment.
No problem. There has been reports that there is a level of distrust between the leadership core and the Senate, which prevented commitment from being met early on. Can you explain how you plan to deal with conflict effectively going forward?
So going forward, the hope would be to establish, I guess, just teamwork and a sense of community early on. I think what happened was, people didn't know each other. And so the sense of okay, here's a new group. What do they want? The sense of I can't trust them, but afterwards, after just honestly, after fall term, getting into winter term, there was more time to get to know each other. And then from there, it was oh, we're working together now. We're a team. And I really feel that to really push past this is where, for example, the summer trainings are going to be very important, because that is where going to be the space to get to know each other. Getting time to really, make team building exercises or something in that regard, really putting time together, showing that, hey, we are a team. We work together. We are working to solve student issues, not internal issues. And I think reframing things and making sure that people are being open and communicating and showing that, hey, we care for students. That's why we're here. That's why we're on student government. And so while there was a sense of distrust with LCOR early on, it got resolved because we realized that, oh, we're all fighting for the same thing. We're fighting for students and their needs here on campus.
Do you want to rebuttal?
No.
Okay, perfect. What potential restructuring would you recommend for student government that would make it more operationalized for future generations of student leaders?
I think one of the most important things that can be done to not only increase the community's trust in ASPSU, but also to give more students the accessibility to ASPSU is to make open door meetings actually open doors, invite people to come in, watch the meetings, having a sense that you're actually affecting people really makes people think and work together and make good decisions. Whereas if you're sitting in a closed doors office, you're making decisions in a circle with 10 people, you're not going to be able to effectively address everybody's concerns, and you're also not going to be able to effectively then communicate what you're actually doing to the general student body.
Do you want to rebuttal at all?
Can you repeat the question?
Of course. What potential restructuring would you recommend for student government that would make it more operationalized for future generations of student leaders?
So what I want to to bring for future generations, I mean, I agree, Jeremiah, with you and what you said, but actually what I want to bring is a little bit more transparency that with having, yeah, I agree with having with the open door meetings and all that. Anyone who is welcome to come, regardless, both, for a student, even those for first year, because with a decision of 10 people, that's that's only given a little bit so far. But I mean, why not listen to the opinions of the students actually attending? We can listen to their voice, we can listen to their feedback, how would would it impact their their student life here in Portland State. I mean, we need to think about their needs and all that. That's as much as you guys are making the big shot, calling the shots, but you'd have to think about what the just your rebuttal. Go ahead if you're going to do it.
I was just going to say, yeah, of course it is important to listen, and that was the idea of, having an open door policy would be to allow students in to voice their opinions. In regards, though, to the question of how we could restructure, I think something that would be important when it comes to restructuring is that we make sure that, there's more ability to voice issues, for example. Students, I know there's the online platform, but that's not really an effective way sometimes. People don't actively seek out the website. And so I think one way to restructure would be kind of making more ways for students to introduce or to talk. But I think also one of the most important ways that we could restructure is just making sure that roles that aren't important are being cut, and then making sure that there's more opportunity to push forward and making sure that everything that we have, all of our resources, are being utilized in the best way. For example, we've already done some internal job descriptions, and we're kind of deciding what we should cut and what we should keep, because some of it just is not necessary going into the next year.
Awesome. In a recent, this is for PSU for you. In a recent interview, a member of your slate explained a plan to replace the current transit fare plan with a new plan that would calculate the price and be more expensive for those getting financial aid. Can you explain this more?
Yeah, of course. So this is a really exciting project. I'm hoping to be able to work on this a lot. I'm a huge transit nerd. So the way that this is going to work is that everybody will be able to get free transit out of this. We will be hiking the price of tuition only for people who are fully covered by financial aid, and that would be enough money to then create free TriMet passes for all students. Currently, it's $100 a term. I pay that; it's kind of a lot, and.
We'll finish this.
Yeah, basically how it would work is that the people with their tuition fully covered by financial aid would be paying for the students that don't have their tuition fully covered by financial aid.
But here's the question though: what would happen to like out of state students, and as well as with international students? Because they would have to pay the $100 bills, and because from what I remember, even if you were to increase the tuition of a PSU and having with a student apply for financial aid and then turns out and get rejected and all that, they wouldn't they would still have to pay the $100 extension. I mean, honestly, how would it help though actually? Because from when I came to ASPSU, even without this and all that, it was a lot of money. But actually, I'd rather not just sacrifice just having to like add that to the tuition, because honestly, in my financial situation, it's like too much actually, having to pay having no financial aid as well as just deal with it.
So to answer those concerns, and this is something I feel needs to be clarified, is that the point of this would be that financial aid would be the only thing that's impacted. So it would not be something where if you, like students would not have to pay for this out of their own pocket. This would only be coming from financial aid. So therefore, students who don't have financial aid, they don't qualify, they would still qualify for this program because all of the costs be covered by financial aid. The whole point of this is to make sure that students don't have to feel any of the burden. We're hoping to eliminate completely this cost that students are having to pay of $100 per, or $100 to have access to the transit, and just eliminating that. That would be the hope of this. Of course, this whole payment process is still being worked. We're still communicating with TriMet. We're still communicating with the financial aid office. And we're really trying to make sure we can do whatever we can to make sure students don't have to feel any financial pressure and have full access to all transportation across Portland. That's our hope.
Is this including financial aid that comes in the form of a loan?
Ooh, yeah, I was about to mention that. That was like...
So people who are getting the loan of financial aid would still be paying more through the loan.
I think currently still there's discussion regarding how the payment process is going to work. Our hope would be to make sure that students don't have to feel any financial pressure. Those are still in the works, still being developed. And so, these are very valid concerns to bring up, and I appreciate these being brought up. I think this is something that we need to be making sure we're thinking about.
Yeah,
but the hope is to make sure that no matter what, students aren't feeling any financial pressure whatsoever.
Would you like to
Yeah,
comment?
that was one of the main things I was about to address, but thank you for clarifying that.
Okay. The current administration chose to pivot from discounting. This is actually for Voices for Action specifically. So the current administration chose to pivot from discounting parking to discounting transit, but your slate continues to advocate for low parking costs. How do you plan to succeed where the previous slate fell short?
Oh boy. Well, that is currently this is an ongoing situation that we're still currently in the talks with both Angelica and as well as with the for the potential for both matters and within student fee committee though, because honestly, given that how with the discounted parking is like for one term, because honestly there's little to no parking that's going to be free, because that's like the biggest main concern, even though that we're part of a commuter school with a lot of people having to depend on transit and a lot of people having to take in with cars though. Mm-hmm. There's you're just surcharging them to you just repeat a little bit of the aspect, how just repeat a little bit.
Oh, a little bit. You got it. How do you plan on making that actually actionable, of getting parking costs down?
We would. Well, from what I can honestly say, which is currently under development, what we're trying to hope for, there would be some sort of early bird pass. Well, not early bird pass, but kind of more trying to work out with what areas of the parking should be more targeted with how the what areas from least to least to most and all that, because from most areas and all that, from what I could see, most of them are the really expensive ones, and one of the least is the least expensive. Vary from term to term.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Got it. So what is your slate's plan for maintaining a social media presence and communications with the student body while managing your roles at ASPSU, especially considering your individual slates? I'm sorry, this was for the different slate. So this part doesn't make sense. You're just going to have to deal with it.
All good.
Minimal or non-existent social media presence outside of election season. That's actually applicable. Yeah.
I would say, from like all platforms, well, given that it's been approved by, from the other, from committees like, from like, judicial, I would say, even though we do have like the, with the schools, Twitter, X, Instagram, Snapchat, as well as, with the Facebook, and as well as with the other, platforms like TikTok that we have. In addition, which I do sometimes consider Twitch a little bit, given that, how we can, like, like in case there's like, like in-person or virtual events, like, it can be, people that can be attend, but we just want to, like, just to bring like a little bit more awareness with the school.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that one of the main goals of having social media be a large factor in ASPSU is to get the voice out there, have people know about PSU, or ASPSU rather. And one of the main things that we can do in that regard is having an individual ASPSU presence, so not just the account that says ASPSU, but if you have each individual member specifically advocating for events that ASPSU is helping with, specifically encouraging other students to participate in ASPSU, making their names and their faces recognized around the campus so that they can be an actual voice for the students that students can go to and talk about their issues and say, hey, I need this to get done, and then ASPSU can bring that to their meetings and administrations, and each individual person will have a more okay, you're good. Yeah, all good.
Awesome. Really got it. Just scroll. How do you plan to navigate situations in which the student body's needs differ from the administration's?
So, as student government, our role is to support the needs of students. And so when there are times when, and there have been times when student needs have gone against that of what administration wants. And so as student government, it is our responsibility to voice the concerns of students. And so it is our mission to go to administration and say, hey, here are the needs, here is the demands of students, and this is what we want met. And so when administration isn't listening, I feel like that is, it's showing that they have a disconnect with the students. And if administration is disconnected with students, that's not a good thing. And so administration, if they feel that their position is important, then they need to at least have an opportunity to talk with students and say, hey, let us explain, and let the students rebuttal back and say, hey, no, this is why we feel this way. Because I think what happens oftentimes is, students, they do have needs, they do have concerns, and administration goes kind of like, they're just students, and at the end of the day, students don't have any deals they can make. They can't make backdoor deals with administration. Administration, at the end of the day, isn't going to care what students think. And so that's where we as students, and we as student government especially, have to make sure that we are voicing these concerns to administration and being like, no, these demands must be met because students need these. And if you're not listening to students, then what are you doing? You're building a space for students to help them get their education, to help them improve their lives, so then they can go out into the world and improve other people's lives. So if they're not supporting the student needs, then they're not doing their job as administration.
Oh, you want me to answer? How do you plan to navigate situations where the student body's needs differ from administration's?
Well, picking up from what Jeremiah said, well, he just skips.
Oh, okay, perfect. Awesome.
Honestly, you're wrecking me right at this point. You're wrecking me at this point. I'm being honest.
Don't say that on stage.
Sorry.
You're doing great.
You're doing great. Okay?
Well, I mean,
You're underdog right now. Underdog.
underdog, more like the loser, maybe.
No! How
I mean,
This
let's
is
be real.
this is a question. This is a question for you. How will you ensure student groups interact and collaborate in incoming school years? What is your plan of action?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah. How will you ensure student groups interact and collaborate in the incoming school year? What is your plan of action?
Okay, my plan of action in case for for student groups having to come in, like when they first come in, like I'd say, okay, forgive me my ways of explaining, and all that with examples, but let me give you an example. Like for by the time when I'll put PSU gaming as an example, and please bear with me, Sophia. Please bear with me. And
Yes, Sophia. Jesus. Go ahead. It's okay.
yeah, just a little bit like the. Sorry, I keep repeating and all that, but it's like
You want me to repeat it?
just
Okay.
a little bit.
Of course. I can repeat it a billion times. How will you ensure student groups interact and collaborate in the incoming school year? What is your plan of action?
My plan. Okay. What I picked up before with for example, like let's say if with the new students trying to reach out with the student group with how like let's say this is like intro week, like this is week 1, and most like we want to get to know each other, we want to know what your interests, what we want to know, what we want to see, what you want to do within in the group and all that, like though we're kind of focused on what is drawn to you into this activity group, like for example this student says I want to just get to know people, get to enjoy and all that, okay, let's how about we can we have an event going on, we can have you to introduce with people that who are who share similar interests and as well as people who are different and all that, we can get them to know each other. And that kind of builds upon a foundation with how people getting to know each other as well as with getting along with the same interests, which we impart in the PSU Gaming Club. That which when new people come in, we want to get to know them and what do they want to what do they share their interest in, and we kind of go up on that.
Would you, just for clarity, would you mind repeating the question for me real quick?
Yes.
Thank you.
How will you ensure student groups interact and collaborate in the incoming school year? What is your plan of action?
Wonderful, thank you. So one of the main plans of action that we have when it comes to student groups here on campus is it is my hope to see a space where student leaders of all the different student groups, student organizations, have a space to meet regularly, where they would then go and be able to speak to each other and hear about events, hear about ideas, and then be able to, oh, that's an idea, I want to get involved, and cross-collaborate. Because at the moment, we've made efforts with certain groups here during this last, couple of terms to communicate and, talk over email, but a lot of email communication just falls flat. Email communication has been one of the most difficult things to address going forward. And so the hope would be, though, is just to create a space where students are at all times, or maybe at least, once a month or something like that. So then they can at least have active, time to then talk to each other and collaborate. Because I think that's the big problem at the moment is there's nothing encouraging them to come together, so they never hear about what events are happening between different groups.
Awesome. Students who don't think ASPSU has power to enact actual change, or there are students who don't think that ASPSU has power to enact actual change. How do you plan on addressing this and possibly gaining more power to influence students?
Guess we'll have to do rock, paper, scissors to get this one.
It was Nemo.
Nemo, yeah.
So one of the major ways would be, of course, there's this idea that student government doesn't have power, which to an extent, there is a slight truth to that because at the end of the day, we are students. But we do have enough power we can go to. We have the doors. We have access to different rooms to talk with administration. We have the ability to organize together and mobilize on actions. So the hope would be, it ultimately would be to communicate out to students to say, hey, here's a major issue. We have identified this as student government. We have access to this door. We want to get you guys into this room, and we want you guys to talk about this. We want students as a collective to voice their opinions. Because I think ultimately, at the end of the day, it is student collective voice that has the real power here on campus. And we as student government, our role is to elevate that voice and to really elevate student power. That's where our role, our ability, our, I guess our power comes from, is just lifting student voice. And so it'd be ultimately the hope moving forward to just identify issues and really mobilize students on that. I know that, and I think one of the major ways is showing solidarity in certain efforts. So, for example, in the most recent, things is showing solidarity with students and their right to protest. I think is really helps students to realize that they have a space. This is, student government is working with them and wants to see change happen as much as they do, and they're really boosting their voice, showing that they support them. I know that a lot of different faculty. Or resource centers and faculty groups here on campus voiced their approval and really supporting protesters during this the last protest, and showed that they support student voice. And that, I think, really helps a lot to make students feel like they have something they can do. And that's really honestly where student government's power comes from, is lifting student voice and making sure that action happens for them and to get them into the rooms to make sure that no matter what, administration can no longer ignore them. It is impossible.
Do you want to go?
Skip it.
Okay.
You just destroyed me, I'm being honest. Yeah, literally. You guys just destroyed me right there.
So you mentioned student voices.
No, I'm being serious.
And I don't know if you're aware that certain student groups had made statements offering support to those in the library. And there had also been backlash for that support from administration, asking those groups to take those messages down. In this case scenario, what would you do to support student groups?
So in this case, I feel like that's just a blatant, abuse of power by administration if they're asking student groups to take down statements that they have made. This is if students are united in their voice and their opinion, and administration is intimidated by that, and they're asking people to just be quiet and shut up, I say be louder. That's not a point to back down. That's a moment to be like, this is something we should be talking about across the board if that's what's happening. And I have seen, I've heard reports of that as well. And to me, that's ridiculous. The fact that, the voice of students can't be heard. They're actively pulling these messages down. And so for at least in my opinion, we need to make sure that more of that is happening, and I know that, for example, working with outside organizations can sometimes be a great way to boost that voice, and showing that, going to, I don't know to what extent the local media, but that could help really boost, hey, the administration has been actively trying to cut down and making sure that student voice isn't heard. We should do what we can to make sure voice gets heard. Or I know that, for example, the Vanguard, you guys have been doing a fantastic job in the recent reporting, and I think, really showing that these voices need to get heard, and taking that time to make sure efforts are being put that way. And I feel, let's see, actually, I'll end it there. I'll stop rambling.
Did you want to respond to that at all?
Do you mind repeat that?
Yes. So currently, there are students who have posted on social media messages in support of the occupation of the library. Various student groups have been approached.
Approached by faculty, in regards to
administration.
With the administration, with with the backlash, and I do want to pick up, with I agree with you 100%, hands down, but actually, we actually do have the voice, and we want to, encourage, with, the people, that we're protesting, to have our voice heard in regards to it. In addition, even though our library has, been, and as well as other spaces in here in Portland State, having, been monumentally, been, useful, to give, people, their platform, they want, in regards, with the Occupy Palestine, which, in hindsight, I actually do believe that it should with the Boeing ties being it should be cut off, but given how with the administration put them on hold, that still puts them there's no affirmative action with it. In regards to it, all I have to say is that honestly, Boeing should have cut ties with we would have Sorry.
It's okay. You don't have to apologize for that. Okay, I am done with little questions, but I got a sticky note
Hell yeah.
from the audience somewhere.
Love to see it.
How do you think student ambassadors, the PSU tour guides, should describe PSU to prospective students? Go ahead.
If I have to say, for prospective students, I would say, an organization that, a really upbeat and upbeat organization that are really dedicated to bring, change, for our school. You wanted to make a difference for both, for both in the community and as well as with our student body. Because if we're trying to advocate change, we have to those prospect students have the potential to fall for what we've made right and wrong. Like from what you've mentioned with how the how the shortcomings is, we can see help them see what they could have done and all that in our footsteps.
Yeah, I think I'm probably the most recent person who has undergone orientation here. I am a freshman this year, so I had orientation back in July, and that it was interesting because I saw a lot of things that were good about the campus, but I didn't see some of the places that I enjoy the most nowadays on campus. I was not toured through any of the resource centers, which I found strange, and I think that that's something that should be advertised more really than a lot of other things on campus. I think that having specifically maybe tours that correlate to people's majors, things that are more aligned with how
how they need to be, they're more accessible and more.
Yeah, just generally tours that are more aligned with students' specific needs in each of their sort of pathways. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Do you want a little?
No, it's all good. I didn't have much to say.
Oh, that's okay.
It was added. It was just
No, yeah, no problem. Yeah, we wish this was like a conversation, but it's a debate. We're now going to open it up to the audience to ask questions on that mic over there.
I swear to God, if you ask me what
Yeah,
my
go
favorite
ahead.
thing is.
Open mic night.
Okay, this is a question for.
Oh, one second.
This is a question
Oh,
for.
can't hear it yet.
Hold on.
Okay, this is a question for both slates. So, I know Voices for Action has plans for decreasing the price of parking, and then I know PSU for You has plans for decreasing or removing the cost of public transportation. Those are both really lofty goals. If those don't pan out, depending on whose administration is under, do y'all have any plans, like backups, for what you could do if those don't work out?
I'll be honest, at the moment, we haven't considered any backup options. We're really hoping and really pushing hardcore to make sure that this transit pass happens. We have definitely put a lot of efforts into making sure that, we've been talking to the right people, making sure that this pushes forward. But however, if this doesn't pan out, I think continuing to look for other avenues would be a major point in this. I do know that there's already efforts going on to maximize the parking spaces here in the garages. So hopefully if that, we can just put more effort into that, making sure that, efforts are already being pushed forward can, be maximized. I think parking is honestly one of the more difficult issues here on campus because it is the more people who need parking, the less supply there's always going to be. And so, honestly, no matter what, I think it's going to have to be finding ways, like, say, if this transit pass doesn't work, it'd be like, how can we then lower the cost of transit? What other options could we do? But honestly, I don't think there should be any failure in getting this transit pass to happen. We've already talked to TriMet. We've already talked to financial aid. I think they've even talked within the city board already, or within the city, and most people have been giving thumbs up. So, honestly, if this were to fail, it'd be a huge shock. But at the moment, we don't have any concrete backup plans.
That's heartening.
Yeah, something I would add to the with with a proposal. I mean, even though it's good, but actually, given that how a lot of people, which I see a lot of people with cars, with that, maximizing what that parking space is and all that. I mean, honestly, given that the way that my slate is trying to advocate for in case if it does fail, we have actually begun doing a little bit of contingencies in plan in case of if our what we want, if reducing the costs, and we've been discussing as of late in regards to in case this plan failed.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have another follow-up question for this plan. Have there been comments from people who receive financial aid?
At this time, I don't believe so. We've been very much so in the early stages. We're planning to kind of get student input soon, or at least within the as we move forward. And because honestly, we want to make sure we're having as much student involvement in this. It's going to be completely transparent to students. But the hope would be that no matter what, that this program would not impact them financially. And I understand it's being taken from financial aid. So that could, for some students may, it be more reliant on that. And so it'd be more, into my understanding, part of the idea was it would be like a sliding scale, where those who are more impacted, they'd have to pay a lower price, whereas those who, they have more wiggle room, they'd be kind of paying a bigger, lump sum of it. So it'd be kind of the hope would be to make sure that it scales with the needs of students.
Aren't those receiving financial aid the ones with the most needs?
That's a toughie.
Yes, but those that are receiving financial aid would be those receiving more financial aid would be bearing the brunt of the force, and so that the students that don't receive as much financial aid wouldn't have to pay up front, and so the students that receive financial aid and have their whole tuition covered, they would still have everything covered. It's just that if there's any excess, if there's wiggle room, that would fill the gap and would pay for more students, basically.
Okay.
That and
It's, if I may just quickly go ahead.
Yeah.
I was going to say that it's, of course, currently in a work in progress, but these are issues we do want to address. We want to make sure that no matter what, students are not feeling that they are being, if this becomes a burden to students, then we have failed.
Yeah.
That is not the goal of this in any way, shape, or form.
Awesome. Is there any? Oh, go ahead. I see over there.
How y'all doing?
What's up, Nolan?
Good.
That's good.
I know y'all have been voicing how you're in support of students' rights to protest and whatnot. I wanted to ask because there were reports from local news that things like archives have been stolen and whatnot, but there's articles that have recently come out saying that that's not true. So I wanted to ask if you have any plans particularly to combat misinformation in the event of those kind of things happening again.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that a lot of the misinformation and the reason that lots of misinformation has been spreading is partially the fault of administration, closing down campus, making it more difficult for students to get in there and video and photograph. In part, completely closing off the library for the next 6 months, or sorry, not actually 6 months, but until the fall term, until September, which, based on construction, would not really need to be that long, as far as I'm aware. And I actually spoke to one of the archivists recently. A friend of mine's mom is actually one of the archivists here at PSU. She went into the building and was able to actually talk to the protesters while they were there, and was very surprised that not any damage had been caused, and that they were super willing to work with her to make sure that that continued, which I think is amazing. And we really need to be spreading those people's stories more.
Is it okay if I kind of jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. Just wanted to make sure. So I think in regards to that with fighting misinformation is, one, very much so promoting for example, I'm going to once again plug the Vanguard. They did a fantastic job. And I think honestly making sure that we're promoting those stories over anything else. And so, the local news and news stations, they're going to twist the stories to make it more, I guess, financial for themselves. They're going to take an idea and run with it. And to combat that we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to be no, here is the real story. Here's the real truth. And so, if anything, at least within student government, is we'd want to promote like the vanguard here on campus. We'd want to promote, actions taken by, local stations that are trying to really get to the heart of the story, not just social media influencers posting a post on Twitter and getting Elon Musk to respond to it. Like, that's ridiculous. And that's not telling a good story. That's just telling or that's not, oh, sorry. Thank you. Yeah.
Do you want to say something? No, okay.
No.
Do you have another question?
Anything follow up?
Perfect. No, that was great.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Hello. Welcome back.
Hey, glad to see y'all. Too, my name's Mitch Brown. I'm one of your military veteran students here. And I was just curious hearing y'all, because we're all at university, so we're here to learn. Like really, like we're still students. So and y'all are doing a tough thing on stage. Seriously, and if that's your job, you want hey, you're gonna get into a tough thing. So we got to have conversations to be able to do this. And I was curious, do any of you know who Willie Halliburton is?
Our chief of police here.
Chief of police,
Yeah.
great. Have y'all met with him? He does coffee with Chief on Wednesdays at 11.
Yeah, I've heard. I've been to some of them. but-
Great, awesome. Have y'all been to him?
I have not been to those specifically, but there are also UPSOC meetings, which is the oh god, what does it stand for? It's the Oversight Committee for CPSO and for Public Safety on campus, and he is at those, and he, so I interact with him pretty regularly.
Great. I've met him. Charming man. I think he really cares.
Yeah, he does.
Hearing how he's interacted with PSU, and it was just kind of like the arming and disarming. I think it's a conversation, and it's still going on, which is good. But talking with him is what has happened is that he did disarm, and then we did have a disarmed group for a while, and then what happened is that weapons and then bad things started entering PSU because that's just kind of what happened, and so that's why it got reinstated. And so it was just that it wasn't that it wasn't tried, it was tried. And then really bad things started to happen in dangerous ways that you might not get if you do not work or live on that side of things, which is why we're here, and that's why we're having the discussions, because it's a safety thing for, the other human being that's trying to protect you. They have a family to go home to as well. It's a big conversation. But my question was just that. I just want to know if y'all knew who he was, just because he's a great person to ask these questions to, and just to kind of learn why it happened. That way you can have a conversation and say, hey, do you have the paperwork? Do you have videos? Can we see what it was? How bad was it? And maybe, that way we can develop that conversation more and find out exactly where we are.
Yeah, and if I could touch on a little bit what you were saying. So a lot of the outrage that was caused by the police rearming themselves on PSU campus was the lack of transparency and communication that they had with students and with groups like UPSOC. They were not informed that this was happening, and they only found out after they had rearmed themselves. This wasn't a discussion that the police force had with anybody, and so that's something that as students we deserve, that we have the right to know when that happens, if not have some say in it, right?
Absolutely, and I think we're talking about the same issue with the speech right now and voices. I think it's the same thing to where things happen and then we don't have a choice, like the library closing. That's terrifying. Historically, we're in a bad place. We didn't have a choice. We're being told it's something else, and people on the inside were like, hey, that's not what it is, and we just lost our library. This is really bad stuff, and it's hard to ask questions about that because what's transparently being told or informed to us is not, and we're here, and I've traveled outside. I'm not from Portland, so I know the stigmas and things can be attached, and I know that that's not what it is. There's a little part of that, but that's not what it is, and it gets kind of hard to ask questions when like you're saying, they're not being transparent. Our library's closed, and we just lost that for a long time. But I just wanted to ask, and just that if you all knew who he was, because he's open to those conversations, and he dangerously, I think, tries really hard, and I think he cares. So, but thank you all for taking the question.
You're definitely welcome. Thank you for coming here.
Have a good one.
Again. Hello.
Hey, I'm Drew. So I have a couple of questions about public safety as well.
Go for it.
I
Go
think
for it.
that, do you guys know who actually watches the cameras that are in our parking lots?
I do not.
Because I'm not sure that anyone ever actually does.
Oh boy.
That is a wonderful question.
Would not surprise me.
That's one thing I really want to know. Another thing, due to that, because if we actually had some kind of monitoring, at least there, I think that is one of the places that are one of the most insecure places in the school, especially for our property, because car thefts and things, especially in parking lot 3, don't ever park there, absolutely brutal. It's very easy to steal a car or break into a car out of there. There's virtually no monitoring, and even if there was, there's still vagrants just wandering around. In fact, the other day I encountered one just wiping his ass in the stairway and, casing cars and wiping his ass in the stairway and just being crazy. Like, nobody's in there doing anything. He could have been there for hours and hours, but nobody's watching the cameras. And I was thinking if you guys could voice for me
Yeah,
that,
I mean, I would.
that more than just that, but also that you guys could voice to me that we should be able to watch those cameras ourselves. We should be able to have a website where we can actually watch our own car from those cameras, and at least then somebody is going to be monitoring those things, and we can be able to monitor our own property, make sure that, because like if my car got stolen, I can't afford another one, not on my student loans.
That's actually what my what our site is trying to focus on. We were trying like what you said before. That's what we're trying to do. Like we want to give you guys access so that you see for the security for your property. Like in case of like if it gets stolen, you know at an instant. Because sometimes I'll be honest, I'll be frank with you. I'm like you. I get paranoid by like the slightest things. Like in case of like like if my car is like being carjacked, like yeah, that's like I share the same sentiment as you, and I do want to have that type of.
Also about the disarming thing too. I think it's a little bit of a little buzzwordism going on there because in reality, this is a very urban campus, and there's a lot of vagrants who have concealed guns that we have no idea about.
Yeah.
Who just wander in and out of here as they please at different times of the day and night. So I think that although we do need to be armed here, hell, even the students may be, but I mean, we can't really talk too much about that or actually encourage that. But anyway, regardless, basically what I was trying to get at is that these situations are happening here. Obviously, there's a lot of problems out here, but one moment. Actually, I forgot what I was going to say. I got carried away.
And if you don't mind, we definitely hear the concerns in regards to public safety, and that's part of the whole the oversight committee regarding public safety is making sure that there's transparency.
It came back to me.
Huh? Oh, go ahead. You got it. Go ahead.
So what I wanted to say also is, how do we know that the police here are actually trained in a way where they can actually apprehend someone without using their guns? Because I think that's a more important question to be asked than whether or not we should disarm, because we need to be armed here, the police, whatever. But we need to also know that our police are trained, like at least be a blue belt in jiu-jitsu or something, so you can actually get someone on the ground without having to shoot them, just because, like in the case of Jason Washington, if a gun falls on the ground, maybe he has another gun, like let's shoot him. I don't know what the actual situation was, what happened there per se for sure, but that's what the narrative that's being presented is that his gun dropped and then he got shot because a gun dropped on the ground. Well, at that point he's disarmed, right? Or we can only imagine so. Why would you shoot the guy?
And so, to answer that, I think a big part of that within the oversight committee, UPSOC, a lot of their role is making sure that there's, transparency regarding what training is happening for, the security here on campus. That there's transparency in the conversations, like when they rearmed themselves. That was, many students were upset by that because there wasn't clear transparency and understanding. Like if there isn't acts, if they're not being trained in ways to de-escalate a situation or ways to apprehend, people without causing, without violence, that comes with training, that comes with effort. And that's the whole hope of the UPSOC committee is to do that.
But if you guys could create a test with which we can actually confirm that they are in fact trained to a point where they can actually apprehend someone, especially someone who's as large or larger than them, without the need of their weapon or a weapon in general, that is what I would really like to know, because you can say whatever you want about it, UPSOC does whatever, but if we don't have an actual test that we can confirm that they do in fact have these skills, then we're never going to know.
Sure, no, that's
Sure,
excellent
that's
point.
definitely to the point. That what we're trying to do.
Oh, and I was just going to say, in regards to that, I think these are important issues to bring up and things to to talk about. We'll definitely be talking about these moving forward, because that's the whole point. Is having conversation, talking about these tough issues, and really recognizing, because like you were saying, there's different voices on these ideas. So it's important to hear all the conversation, because I know for many students, the presence of a gun on campus really makes them feel unsafe, no matter who has that gun. And that is a major problem. And so making sure that conversations are being held to make sure that, there is high training for safety here on campus is something that just needs to be brought and discussed. And so all these issues you've brought up, we'll make sure that these are being discussed within the correct spaces.
But in the case of an active shooter, if everyone's disarmed, then that doesn't really help us.
Yeah.
If I could touch on that real quick. As we learned last week, the CPSO is not the only police force in Portland, or that has access to Portland's campus. As you said, this is an urban university, right? And so Portland Police has jurisdiction here. It's not as though they can't help, right?
Can I add on to that?
And we can't disarm Portland Police.
Yeah, so I'd like to know if there's a statistic on how fast in such an event whoever is in charge of responding could do so. Do you have a statistic on how fast, if there was a public shooter right there in the square right now, how many minutes maybe it would take for the Portland Police Department or somebody who's actually armed to not only during that, but also how long it would take to relay that information to them and then get a response that they'd actually get here and respond?
At this time, I don't think I definitely don't have a statistic on that.
Yeah, I can do some research on that. I could also do some research on how effective police are at actually stopping active shooters, which I know has been an issue in the past in lots of places, including in my hometown. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, because for all we know, they might be one of those ones who's also not trained properly, and then in cases I've seen in the past, the police officer ends up shooting the wrong person who's also just has a concealed carry weapon, and they're just doing their thing here and ends up getting shot anyway because they shot the wrong person or something like that. So yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you.
We'll look into issues.
Thank you so much.
What else?
Hello.
So I was just wondering if ASPSU had a plan of action to actually combat the issue of transparency with CPSO. Are you guys planning on, working with CPSO in order to bridge that gap between students and, officers on campus?
Yeah, so our presidential candidate, Brady Rowland, is actually in the UPSOC committee, in the Oversight Committee for Public Safety, and she is incredibly committed. She has done lots of gun violence prevention work over her life, and she is incredibly committed to making sure that there is transparency and that students know what is happening on campus with regards to public safety, and she will be doing lots of work with that in the future.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Well, oh my God.
One more question unrelated to that stuff I was talking about earlier. But in the event of a natural disaster here, like if the big earthquake hits or something like that.
Ooh, that's a really good topic.
Yeah, do you guys know, I'm in a class for that kind of thing right now, but I'm wondering if you guys would be able to relay information on how everybody could prepare for such a thing, because if that were to happen tomorrow, I know for a fact that nobody here would know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned earlier with stuff like drills and trainings at the beginning of the year, and that could be done in conjunction with a lot of sort of beginning of the year activities of earthquake drills. Very important. Obviously, there's a lot of infrastructure that also needs to be upgraded to make sure that buildings themselves are safe and not going to immediately collapse, right, if the big one hits. that's not something that we really have control over.
The biggest thing I think that you could have control over, though, is inform
exactly
students here about which buildings are the most structurally unsound.
Yeah, I currently live in the Ondine dorms, which I don't know if you've seen them, but it's structurally supported by asbestos. That's a joke. It's not great though, and so yeah, there's a very real concern of an earthquake happening and infrastructure collapsing, but that's something that we can try and improve, and we can also try and make sure that students know that they're in buildings that are more dangerous than others. That's definitely something that would go, I feel, into those sort of terms and conditions that nobody reads and then signs off on when they're getting the dorm. But that's something that we can make more visible. Yeah.
Awesome. We do have to wrap up.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Do you want this mic? There you go.
We have one more, right? We have one more.
Yeah, so thank you to everyone who joined us today, and thank you for all the questions. We appreciate it. We have pizza and salad and brownies. I think there's some left. And our next debate is scheduled for Friday, May 10th at 2 p.m., focusing on our president and vice president candidates. So we hope to see you there. I think it'll be an exciting one. And don't forget to cast your vote. You can cast your vote by looking in your email and searching 2024 ASPSU election ballot. So once again, thank you. Have a good night.